They knocked as if the condo already belonged to them. The broker held a glossy folder with a photo of my sanctuary right on the cover, treating it like a sold product. But when he listed my parents as the sellers, the betrayal was not the worst part. I went cold at his justification that the county record showed it. I drove straight to the records office only to see a line that made the clerk pale. The borrower on the mortgage was me. My name is Isla Simmons, and at 35 years old, I had finally learned that peace was not a location, but a fortress you had to defend. I was standing in the doorway of my oceanfront sanctuary in Tideglass Cove, a place that smelled of salt spray and old cedar, watching that peace evaporate in the span of a single heartbeat. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. The knock had been sharp, authoritative, the kind of sound made by someone who did not expect to wait. When I opened the door, I did not find a neighbor returning a package or the building manager checking a leak. I found an invasion force. Standing on my welcome mat was a man in a navy suit that cost more than my first car. His teeth bleached to a blinding, unnatural white. Behind him stood two couples, dressed in the sort of casual luxury that screamed of country clubs and silent auctions. They were looking past me, peering over my shoulder into the living room, their eyes scanning the crown molding and the ocean view with the hungry calculation of vultures circling a fresh carcass. The man in the suit smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. It was a salesman's smile, practiced and vacant. He took a step forward, his polished loafer hovering over the threshold, assuming I would step back. That was his first mistake. "Private showing," he said, his voice smooth, carrying the distinct cadence of someone who was used to doors opening simply because he was standing in front of them. He spoke as if he were walking into his own living room, or perhaps a hotel room he had already paid for. "Come right in. Folks, the lighting this time of day is spectacular." I did not move. I planted my feet, my bare toes gripping the cool tile of the entryway. I was wearing oversized sweatpants and a coffee-stained t-shirt, hair thrown up in a messy bun, a stark contrast to the silk scarves and pressed linens standing in the hall. But this was my territory. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the polite inflection women are raised to employ. "I think you have the wrong unit," the broker chuckled, a dismissive sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. He glanced at the glossy folder in his hand, then back at me with a look of patronizing patience. "No mistake. Sweetheart, we have an appointment. The seller's arranged for a private tour while the unit is unoccupied." He tried to step around me again. I shifted my weight, blocking the gap. "I am not sweetheart," I said, "and this unit is not unoccupied. I live here." The couples behind him shifted, exchanging confused glances. One of the women, a blonde with oversized sunglasses perched on her head, whispered something to her husband. The broker's smile faltered, just for a second, before he recovered his mask. He held up the folder, tapping the cover with a manicured finger. "Look, there might be a miscommunication with the scheduling, but I have the listing agreement right here. We drove down from the city. These are serious buyers." I looked at the folder. The branding was high-end, gold foil stamped on heavy cardstock. There was a photograph of my balcony on the cover, taken from the beach, framing the view that I drank my coffee in front of every morning. But it was the text beneath the photo that made the blood drain from my face and pool heavily in my stomach. Property address, 12 Pelican Way, Unit 4B, seller, Harrison and Celeste Simmons, my parents. The world tilted on its axis. The hallway seemed to stretch and warp. Harrison and Celeste, not Walter Simmons, my grandfather, who had signed the deed over to me 2 weeks ago with a shaking hand and a clear mind. Harrison and Celeste, the people who believed control was the highest form of love, and that financial independence was a threat to family unity. I felt a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless, but I refused to show it. I looked up from the paper, locking eyes with the broker. He looked bored, expecting me to apologize and step aside. "Who gave you the lobby code?" I asked. The question came out sharp, cutting through his rehearsed charm. He sighed, checking his watch, a Rolex, gold, ostentatious. "Look, miss, we really need to get started. The owners gave us access. I asked you a question. I said," my voice rising just enough to echo off the hallway walls, "this is a secure building. Who gave you the code to the main entrance? And who gave you the code to the lockbox?" I glanced at the door frame. There was no lockbox there. I stepped out into the hall, barefoot, and looked at the railing of the walkway. There, clamped tightly to the metal bar, was a gray lockbox I had not placed there. It sat like a tumor, alien and malignant. The broker looked annoyed now. He lowered the folder, his posture shifting from welcoming to confrontational. "Your mother," he said. "Celeste. She gave us the codes this morning. She said the tenant might still be moving things out, but that we could work around you." Tenant. The word hung in the air, heavy and insulting. They had reduced me to a squatter in my own home. They had erased my ownership with a phone call. "I am not a tenant," I said. "I am the owner. And you are trespassing." One of the buyers, a man in a pastel polo shirt, cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, but not in the way a decent person would be uncomfortable at intruding. He looked annoyed that his shopping trip was being interrupted by drama. "They said you might get emotional," the man said. The hallway went silent. I looked at him. I looked at his expensive shoes, his bored wife, and the arrogance radiating off him in waves. Emotional, the weaponized word used to discredit women, to invalidate anger, to dismiss facts. My parents had primed them. They had painted a picture of a hysterical daughter, a loose end to be tied up, a problem to be managed. They expected me to scream. They expected me to cry or to launch into a frantic explanation. They expected the unstable daughter Harrison and Celeste had warned them about. I gave them nothing. I stared at the man in the pastel polo until he looked away, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating. I let it become a physical weight on their shoulders. I did not blink. I did not fidget. I just stood there, a barrier of flesh and bone that refused to yield. The broker broke first. "Okay, look," he said, his voice losing its professional sheen. "We do not need a scene. We just need to do a quick walkthrough. 5 minutes. No," I said. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my sweatpants. I did not call the police. Not yet. I stepped forward, invading the broker's personal space, and raised the camera. "Hey, you cannot do that," he protested, shielding his face with the folder. I snapped a photo of him. I snapped a photo of the buyers, capturing their shocked expressions. I reached out and grabbed the folder before he could pull it away, snapping a clear, high-resolution image of the listing agreement on the cover. I captured the names, Harrison and Celeste Simmons. Then I walked to the railing and took a picture of the lockbox. I took a picture of the unit number on my door. I walked to the end of the hall and took a picture of the brass plaque that read, "Pelican Crown Residences." I was building a timeline. I was gathering evidence. The broker was red in the face now. "Give me that phone," he snapped, stepping toward me. I turned on him, and the look in my eyes must have been terrifying, because he stopped dead in his tracks. "Get out," I said. The broker scoffed, trying to regain control of the narrative. "You are making a mistake. The county record shows your parents as the owners. I checked it myself this morning. You are obstructing a legal sale. The county record." The phrase hit me harder than the sight of my parents' names. My grandfather had deeded the property to me. His lawyer, Mr. Corrigan, had confirmed it was recorded. I had held the paper in my hand. "What name is on the record?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. He sneered. "The same as always. Harrison and Celeste Simmons." He was lying, or he was wrong. Or something far more sinister had happened in the last 14 days. I stepped back into my apartment. I did not slam the door. Slamming the door is an admission of loss of control. It is an act of frustration. I was not frustrated. I was at war. I closed the door gently, with a soft, final click. I threw the deadbolt. I engaged the security latch. From the hallway, I heard the broker muttering, "Unbelievable. We will come back when she is gone. I will call Harrison." I leaned my back against the cool wood of the door, breathing in the silence of my apartment. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. They had listed my home. They had given out codes. They had sent strangers to walk through my life as if I were a ghost. I looked at the coffee table where my grandfather's old leather suitcase sat. Inside was the envelope he had told me to open only if they tried something. I had hoped to never touch it. I had wanted to believe that for once. The wealth and status that consumed my parents would be enough for them, that they would let me have this one small corner of the world. But greed is not about need. It is about reach. I did not go to the balcony to cry. I did not pick up the phone to call my mother and demand an explanation. I knew exactly how that call would go. She would gaslight me. She would use her soft, soothing voice to tell me I was confused, that I did not understand the complexities of finance, that they were doing this for my own good. She would twist reality until I apologized for existing. Not today. I walked into the bedroom and stripped off the sweatpants. I put on a pair of dark jeans, a white silk blouse, and a blazer. I brushed my hair back and tied it tight. I put on shoes that made a distinct sound when I walked. I needed to feel solid. I needed to feel formidable. I grabbed my keys and my purse. I took the folder of documents I kept on the desk, the ones Grandpa had given me. I did not know if they were still valid, but they were my ammunition. I bypassed the elevator. I did not want to run into the vultures in the lobby. I took the stairs, 4 flights down to the garage, my footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. My car was waiting in the shadows. I threw the bag in the passenger seat and climbed in, locking the doors immediately. The air inside the car was stifling, hot and still. I started the engine, the air conditioning blasting against my face, drying the cold sweat on my forehead. I navigated out of the garage, squinting against the bright coastal sunlight. As I turned onto the main road leading away from Tideglass Cove, my phone buzzed on the center console, a text message. I knew who it was before I looked. I could feel the invisible string that connected me to her, the line she yanked whenever she felt me drifting out of her orbit. I waited until I hit a red light before I glanced at the screen. Mom. The preview message was short, but it carried the weight of 35 years of manipulation. Don't make this ugly. This is for the family. I stared at the words, for the family. That universal shield used to justify every trespass, every cruelty, every stolen moment of autonomy. For the family meant for them. It always had. I did not reply. I deleted the notification. But I kept the message. It was evidence. It was proof of intent. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, driving away from the ocean, away from the condo, and toward the county seat. The broker had said the record showed their names. He had been so sure, so arrogant in his certainty. I was not going to argue with him. I was not going to argue with my mother. I was going to the source. I was going to the Mariner County Recorder's office, where the truth was etched in digital timestamps and scanned signatures. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But I would not fight it in the living room with screaming matches and tears. I would fight it in the archives. I would fight it with paper. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white again. The road ahead was long, and I had a feeling that what I would find at the end of it would be worse than a rude broker. But I was Isla Simmons. I was Walter Simmons' granddaughter, and I was done being the tenant in my own life. As the highway markers blurred into a continuous gray line on my left, my mind drifted away from the panic of the morning and settled on the quiet, dust-mote stillness of a law office exactly 2 weeks ago. The contrast between that day and this one was sharp enough to cut glass. Today was loud, filled with the intrusion of polished shoes and entitlement. That Tuesday had been silent, smelling of lemonwood polish and old paper, the kind of silence that usually precedes a shifting of tectonic plates. I was sitting across from Mr. Corrigan, my grandfather's attorney. He was a man who looked as if he had been carved out of the same mahogany as his desk. Solid and unmoving, he did not offer me coffee. He did not ask how my job was going or comment on the weather. He simply slid a single document across the green blotter. "It is recorded," he had said. "It is yours." There was no fanfare. There were no balloons, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, and crucially, no family meeting. That was exactly how Grandpa Walter had wanted it. Walter Simmons had been a man of few words, but massive intent. He had spent the last decade of his life watching his son, my father Harrison, and his daughter-in-law, Celeste, operate. He had watched them the way a seasoned captain watches a storm front, with a healthy respect for the damage they could cause and a grim determination to batten down the hatches. He knew them better than they knew themselves. He knew that if he had announced his intention to give me the beach condo while he was still alive, or even in a will read aloud to the group, the room would have exploded. Harrison would have blustered about asset management and tax brackets. Celeste would have cried, softly and beautifully, dabbing her eyes with a linen handkerchief while listing reasons why I was not ready for such responsibility. They would have filibustered him into submission. In the living room, the loudest voice wins. In the living room, the person who is willing to make the biggest scene controls the narrative. My parents were masters of the living room. They were the undisputed champions of Stonegate Heights, a neighborhood where the grass was measured with rulers and the passive aggression was thick enough to chew. But Grandpa understood something vital. The people who love control always win in the living room, but they lose in the records room, so he had bypassed them entirely. He had transferred the title to me quietly, legally, and irreversibly while he was still breathing. He denied them the performance. He denied them the argument. I picked up the deed that day in Mr. Corrigan's office, feeling the weight of the paper. It felt heavier than a few sheets of wood pulp should feel. It felt like freedom. It felt like a shield. Mr. Corrigan had watched me over the rim of his spectacles. Walter was very specific. He had told me, "He said to tell you that possession is 9/10 of the law, but the other 1/10 is the only part that holds up in court. Keep your paperwork clean." Isla. I had nodded. Tucking the deed into my bag, I thought I understood. I thought the battle was over before it had even begun. I was naive. My parents, Harrison and Celeste, did not operate in the realm of direct confrontation if they could avoid it. They operated in the realm of aggressive benevolence. They did not steal. They managed. They did not control. They guided. They were the benevolent dictators of our family, ruling from their pristine fortress in Stonegate Heights, where every problem could be solved with a check, a lawyer, or a soft, disappointed voice. I remembered the dinner we had 3 days after Mr. Corrigan gave me the deed. I had not told them yet. I wanted to hold the secret close for just a little while longer, to savor the ownership before they tried to stain it, but somehow, they knew. Information in our family flowed upstream to them like water to the ocean. Perhaps a neighbor had seen me moving boxes. Perhaps they had their own spies. We were sitting at their dining table, a slab of marble so cold it numbed your forearms. Celeste was picking at a salad that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She looked up at me, her eyes crinkling in that specific way that everyone else thought was warm but I knew was assessing. "So," she had said, her voice light, airy, like a flute playing a melody you could not quite catch. "We hear you are spending time at the Cove." I had frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth. I had said, "Grandpa left it to me." I waited for the explosion. I waited for Harrison to slam his hand on the table. Instead, Celeste just smiled. It was her cute smile. It was the smile she used when I was 6 years old and tried to bake cookies, resulting in a flour-covered kitchen. It was a smile of indulgent pity. It was a smile that said, "Oh, look at you, trying to be a grown-up. How adorable. That is wonderful. Sweetie," she had said, "truly, we were worried about that place sitting empty. It needs so much work." Harrison had chimed in then, pouring himself a glass of wine. "It is a big responsibility. Isla, property taxes in Mariner County are a nightmare. The homeowners association fees alone are enough to bankrupt a normal income. I have it covered," I had said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have savings. Celeste had laughed. It was a tinkling, gentle sound. Oh, stop. You do not have to pretend with us. We know how things are. Look, we will handle the taxes and the HOA for you. You just enjoy the beach. You won't have to think about the boring stuff. There it was, the trap. It sounded like generosity. To an outsider, it would look like saints helping their struggling daughter. But I spoke the language of Harrison and Celeste. I knew the translation. We will handle the taxes meant we will pay the bills. So your name is just a formality. You won't have to think meant give us the keys and go play in the sand while the adults talk. If they paid the bills, they owned the leverage. If they handled the administration, they controlled the asset. It was a soft coup. They were trying to annex my property through administrative kindness. No, I had said, thank you, but I want to learn. I will handle it. The air in the dining room had dropped 10 degrees. Harrison's jaw had tightened. Just a fraction. Celeste's smile had become fixed, like a porcelain mask. Well, she had said, stabbing a cherry tomato, do not come crying to us when the county sends a lien letter. We are just trying to help you. Isla, you are always so defensive. I had spent the last 2 weeks playing the part of the good, grateful daughter. I did not brag about the condo. I did not post photos on social media. I went down to Tideglass Cove only on weekends, keeping a low profile, trying to breathe in the salt air and exhale the lifetime of suffocation. But I remembered Grandpa's voice. We had been sitting on that very balcony 6 months ago, watching the sun bleed into the Pacific. He was already sick then, his breathing raspy, but his eyes were sharp. Isla. He had wheezed. If they come screaming, you walk away. But if they come smiling, check the paper. Check the paper. I had taken that advice to heart. For 2 weeks, I had been an archivist of my own life. I kept every receipt from the hardware store. I scanned the deed and saved it to 3 different cloud drives. I printed out the email from Mr. Corrigan. I paid the first month of HOA fees the second the bill arrived. Getting a physical receipt stamped by the building manager, I was learning to survive by documentation. In a family of gaslighters, paper was the only reality that did not shift. But there was one thing I had not checked. One piece of paper I had avoided, in the passenger seat of my car. Sitting inside my grandfather's battered leather suitcase was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Grandpa had a flair for the dramatic in his final days. On the front, in his shaky, block-letter handwriting, were the words, "For Isla, only if they try something." I had found it in the suitcase along with the deed. Mr. Corrigan had handed me the suitcase, saying Walter had packed it for me personally. I had held that envelope in my hands a dozen times in the last fortnight. I had run my thumb over the wax seal. I had held it up to the light, trying to see through the heavy paper, but I had never opened it. Why? Because opening it would have been an admission. Opening it would have meant admitting that Grandpa was right about his own son. It would have meant admitting that my parents were not just overbearing, but actively predatory. It would have meant accepting that the family my mother texted me about was a lie. I wanted to be wrong. God. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe that despite the manipulation, despite the control, they loved me enough to let me have this one thing. I wanted to believe that the something Grandpa warned about was just paranoia from an old man who had seen too much. I wanted to believe that if I was good, if I was quiet, if I played by their rules, they would let me be. So I left the envelope sealed. I treated it like a radioactive isotope. As long as it was closed, the nuclear war hadn't started. As long as it was closed, we were just a normal, slightly dysfunctional family working through a transition. But then came the knock. Then came the broker with his white teeth and his folder. Then came the words, seller, Harrison and Celeste Simmons. They had come smiling. Just as Grandpa predicted, the broker had smiled. My mother had smiled when she offered to pay the taxes. They had smiled right up until the moment they sold my house out from under me. I gripped the steering wheel harder, the leather biting into my palms, The naivety of the last 2 weeks burned in my throat like bile. I had been playing a game of house while they were playing a game of chess. I glanced at the suitcase next to me. The envelope was in there. Waiting. It felt heavy now, charged with a kinetic energy. I knew I would have to open it. Grandpa had prepared for this moment. He had foreseen the smiling broker and the secret sale. He had known that Harrison and Celeste would not be able to resist the urge to reclaim what they believed was theirs by divine right of superior status. But I wasn't ready to open it yet. Not until I saw the proof with my own eyes. Not until I saw the county record that the broker had cited with such smug confidence. I needed to see the blade before I pulled out the shield. I navigated the turn onto the interstate, the engine of my car roaring as I pushed it past the speed limit. The landscape of Mariner County rolled by, strip malls, car dealerships, the endless sprawl of suburbia. It all looked so normal. It all looked so mundane. But beneath the surface of deeds and titles, a war was being fought. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "We will handle it. You won't have to think." She was wrong. I was thinking. I was thinking about every slight, every criticism, every time they had made me feel small so they could feel big. And I was thinking about Grandpa Walter, sitting in his chair, watching the ocean, knowing that one day I would be driving this road, racing against a timeline I didn't even know existed. He had given me the condo, yes, but that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was the warning. The real gift was the knowledge that love in the Simmons family was conditional, but a recorded deed was absolute. I checked my rearview mirror. No one was following me, but I felt pursued. I felt the shadow of Stonegate Heights stretching out to grab my bumper. I reached over and placed my hand on the suitcase. The leather was cool. "I am coming. Grandpa," I thought, and this time, I am checking the paper. The sign for the county government center appeared on the right. I signaled, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic with a recklessness that would have made my mother faint. I didn't care. The time for being the good daughter was over. The time for the cute smile was dead. I was about to walk into the room where the loud voices lost and the paper won, and I prayed, with every fiber of my being, that Grandpa's definition of winning was still valid in a world where my parents could sell a house they did not own. The Mariner County Recorder's Office was designed to strip away emotion. It was a windowless room in the basement of the government center, illuminated by banks of aggressive fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. The floor was speckled linoleum. The counters were beige laminate, and the air smelled of ozone and cheap coffee. This was where passion died and data ruled. Here, legacy was reduced to instrument numbers, and ownership was nothing more than a timestamp on a server. I pulled a paper ticket from the red dispenser near the door, a 42. There were 3 other people in the waiting area. A young couple holding hands, likely closing on their first home, and a man in dusty work boots clutching a roll of blueprints. They looked hopeful. I felt like I was walking to the gallows, or perhaps to the executioner's block to swing the axe myself, when the LED board flashed my number. I walked to Station 4. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a name tag that read, Patricia. She did not look up immediately. She finished typing a long string of numbers, hit enter with a decisive clack, and then turned her gaze to me. "Help you?" she asked. I placed my hands flat on the counter to stop them from trembling. "I need to pull the official title record for a property." I said, "I want to see the complete chain of title for the last 30 days. Patricia sighed, reaching for a notepad. Address or parcel ID? I had the assessor's parcel number memorized. It was the first thing I had learned when Grandpa gave me the deed. 104-229-018. She typed it in. The keyboard sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. I reached into my bag and pulled out the original grant deed Mr. Corrigan had given me. I laid it on the counter, the blue cover sheet facing up. "I am the owner," I said, more to reassure myself than her. "My grandfather transferred it to me 2 weeks ago." Patricia didn't look at my paper. Her eyes were scanning the monitor, darting left and right. She hummed a non-committal sound. "Okay, I see the transfer from Walter Simmons to Isla Simmons. Recording date, January 9th, instrument number 2024-009855. That matches. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Okay, so the broker was lying. The record was clean, but then Patricia stopped. Her fingers froze over the keys. She leaned in closer to the screen, squinting. She scrolled down, then scrolled back up. She took off her glasses, wiped them on her cardigan, and put them back on. "That is odd," she muttered. "What?" I asked. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. "What is odd?" She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Her expression wasn't bureaucratic anymore. It was confused. "Can I see your ID, please?" I handed her my driver's license. She compared the photo to my face, then looked back at the screen. "Ms. Simmons," she said slowly. "Why is your name in the chain twice?" "Twice?" I repeated. "What do you mean, twice?" "I mean, you are listed as the grantee on January 9th, but then you are listed again." She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. The screen was a wall of text, a database grid of dates, names, and document types. There, at the top of the list, instrument, quitclaim deed, date recorded, January 22nd, grantor, Isla Simmons, grantee, Harrison Simmons and Celeste Simmons, as joint tenants with right of survivorship, January 22nd. That was yesterday. The room spun. The fluorescent lights seemed to flare brighter. Yesterday, while I was at work, while I was buying groceries, while I was sleeping, the ownership of my home had been stripped away and handed back to my parents. "That is a mistake," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from underwater. "I did not sign that. I never signed that." Patricia looked at me with a mix of pity and professional detachment. "It is recorded, ma'am. It went through e-recording yesterday afternoon at 3:14 p.m. I need to see it." I said, "Show me the document." She clicked a button labeled Image. A PDF opened on the screen. It was a standard quitclaim deed, the kind you can download from any legal website for $20. It was simple, brutal, and effective. For the consideration of $10 and other good and valuable consideration, Isla Simmons. Hereby quitclaims to Harrison Simmons and Celeste Simmons. I scanned down to the bottom of the page. There was a signature above the line printed with my name, Isla Simmons. I stared at it. It was a good forgery, a very good one. It had the right loop on the S, the right slant on the I. To a bank teller or a clerk, it would look perfect, but I knew my own hand. I knew that when I signed my middle initial, I always lifted the pen slightly before the period. This signature was fluid. It was continuous. It was too smooth. It lacked the micro-hesitation of a human hand moving across paper. It had the vector-perfect curve of a stylus tracing a practiced image. "It is a forgery," I whispered. Patricia frowned. "Ma'am, this was notarized. Look at the block." I looked. It wasn't a wet ink stamp. It was a digital seal. State of Virginia, Electronic Notary Public, notarized via remote online notarization, RON, remote. They hadn't even needed a notary in the room. They had found someone online, someone in a different state, someone who didn't know me, didn't know my face, and didn't know that I was currently sitting in an office in California 3,000 miles away from the jurisdiction of the stamp. "Who submitted this?" I demanded. "I want to see the metadata." Patricia hesitated. "I am going to get my supervisor." She stood up and disappeared behind a partition. I was left alone with the screen, staring at the lie that had stolen my inheritance. I looked at the top corner of the document, where the recording information was stamped. Electronic submission. Submitter contact. And there it was. A phone number, 555-0199. I didn't need to check my contacts. That was my father's cell phone. Harrison. He hadn't even used a burner. He hadn't even tried to hide it. He was so arrogant, so convinced of his own invincibility, that he had put his personal number on a fraudulent federal document. He assumed I would never check. He assumed I would just accept his help and let the condo go. The partition door opened, and a woman in a sharp blazer walked out. She was younger than Patricia, but carried herself with the steel spine of someone who dealt with title disputes for a living. Ms. Simmons? I am Sarah, the shift supervisor. Patricia tells me you are alleging a fraudulent recording. I pointed at the screen. That is not my signature. I did not authorize this transfer. That is my father's phone number listed as the submitter. This was done yesterday via remote notary while I was at my office in the city. I can prove I was nowhere near a computer to sign this. Sarah looked at the screen, then at me. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't tell me it was a civil matter. She saw the fear and the rage in my eyes, and she saw the conflicting dates. If you are stating this is a forgery, she said, her voice dropping to a serious, hushed tone, we can place a document flag. But the record is already public. We cannot unring the bell without a court order. However, we can mark it. Do it, I said, and I want to know who the notary was. Sarah clicked on the notary block. It verified the digital certificate. We can pull the transaction log, she said. But Ms. Simmons, if this was e-recorded, there is usually a title company or a settlement agent involved as the trusted submitter. Individuals cannot just upload deeds to our server directly without an account. She scrolled to the very bottom of the metadata window. Authorized filer. Harborstone title and escrow. Harborstone. I memorized the name. Sarah typed quickly. I am going to place a fraud alert on your parcel ID. This means any new activity will trigger a manual review and a notification to you. But I need you to sign a sworn statement right now, under penalty of perjury, stating that the quitclaim deed is invalid. I will sign it. I said. She printed a form, affidavit of false filing. I grabbed a pen. My hand was steady now. I filled out my name, my address, and the instrument number of the fake deed. I wrote, in clear block letters, Isla Simmons, did not sign, authorize, or consent to this transfer. The signature is a forgery. The remote notarization was obtained via identity theft. I signed it, this time, with my real signature, the one with the hesitation before the period. Sarah took the paper and stamped it immediately. I am scanning this into the system now, she said. It will appear in the chain of title immediately following the quitclaim. Anyone running a search will see a contested title. It effectively kills the marketability of the property. They won't be able to sell it with this cloud on the title. Good, I said. That stops the broker. Sarah was typing again, her eyes fixed on the live feed of the recording queue. She hit the refresh button. Suddenly, her face went slack. Oh, she said. Oh no. What? I asked. What is it? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine alarm in a bureaucrat's eyes. You said you wanted to stop the sale. She said, but Ms. Simmons, they aren't just selling it. She turned the screen back to me. A new line had appeared in the pending queue. It was highlighted in yellow, meaning it had been submitted but not yet indexed. It was sitting in the buffer, seconds away from becoming permanent. Instrument type, deed of trust, borrower, Isla Simmons, lender, Cobalt Shore Holdings, LLC, amount, $450,000. I stared at the numbers. $450,000. They weren't just taking the condo back, they were taking out a loan against it. But the name, why does it say the borrower is me? I asked, my voice rising. If they transferred the title to themselves yesterday, why am I the borrower on a loan today? Sarah scanned the pending file. Because, she said, her voice tight, this deed of trust is backdated. Or rather, it is attached to the chain before the quitclaim. No, wait. She clicked open the pending document. It is a cash-out refinance, she said. But look at the signature block. It is being signed by Harrison Simmons. She pointed to a small line of text under his signature. As attorney in fact for Isla Simmons. Attorney in fact. That meant power of attorney. They were claiming they had my power of attorney. They were claiming I had given them the legal right to sign my name, to borrow $500,000 of debt in my name, and encumber the property. They were loading the condo with debt in my name, and then stealing the title. If they sold it, they kept the cash. If they didn't sell it, I was left with a $450,000 mortgage I never asked for. This was not just theft. This was financial assassination. "Stop it," I said. "You have to stop it. It is pending. It hasn't recorded yet." Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I am trying," she said. "The fraud alert is active. The system should catch it." She hit a command key. "Stop recording." The screen flashed red. "Error. Batch processing. It is in a batch," she said. "It is grouped with other documents from the title company. If I pull it, I pull the whole batch." "Pull it," I snapped. "Pull the whole damn thing." She hit the key again. Override. Supervisor authorization. S. Ramirez. The yellow line on the screen blinked once, twice, then it turned gray. Status: rejected. Manual hold. The room fell silent again, save for the hum of the hard drives. Sarah exhaled, slumping slightly in her chair. "We caught it," she said. "By maybe 30 seconds. It is in the rejection queue. But Ms. Simmons," she looked at me gravely, "someone is trying to close this loan right now. Today, the title company. Harborstone, if they submitted this, it means they think they have a valid signing session happening or recently completed." She tapped the screen. "And if they are using a power of attorney," she trailed off. "You need to call the police, and you need to call that title company, because whoever is doing this is not stopping at the deed. They are trying to liquidate the equity before you can scream." I looked at the rejected file. $450,000. They were going to bury me. My parents were going to cash out my inheritance, leave me with the debt, and smile while they did it. I grabbed my phone. My hands were cold, but my mind was on fire. "I need a copy of that pending file." I said, "I need the metadata. I need to know who the escrow officer is." Sarah hit print. "Here," she said. "It includes the IP address of the submitter." I looked at the paper. Submitter IP. 67.142.90.11. Location: Stonegate Heights. It was the house, my childhood home. The IP address was coming from the router in my parents' study. They were doing it from the desk where I used to do my homework. I looked at Sarah. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "Go get them." I turned and walked out of the recorder's office. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. Victims cry. Victims ask why. I knew why. Greed, control, the absolute inability to let me have anything that wasn't filtered through their hands. I walked out into the bright, blinding sun of the parking lot. I had the deed. I had the fraud affidavit. I had the rejected mortgage attempt. I was not going to call my mother. I was done talking. I was going to the police station, and then I was going to burn their perfect little world to the ground, one piece of paper at a time. The screen in front of Sarah, the supervisor, was a battlefield map where the casualties were measured in dollars and the ammunition was data. The stop recording command had worked, but the system had already digested the attempt. It sat there in the digital purgatory of the rejection queue, a ghost of a transaction that had tried to ruin my life less than 60 seconds ago. "Look at this," Sarah said, her voice dropping to the hushed tone of someone witnessing a crime in progress. The hold caught it, but the logs are generating a trail. They tried to push it through as a rush recording. She clicked on the line item labeled Deed of Trust. I leaned in, the laminate counter pressing hard against my ribs. I needed to see it. I needed to see the structure of the trap. The document expanded. It was a standard California deed of trust, the kind used to secure a mortgage, but the fields were filled with information that made my vision blur. Borrower: Isla Simmons, a single woman. Lender: Cobalt Shore Holdings, LLC. Principal amount: $450,000. $450,000. My heart didn't just sink. It slammed against the bottom of my stomach like a stone dropped down a well. It was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. They weren't just taking the condo back. If they had just transferred the title to themselves, that would have been simple theft. That would have been greed. This was destruction. They were taking out a massive cash-out loan against the property in my name. They were going to strip the equity out of the condo, pocket the $500,000, and leave me holding the debt. The borrower line didn't say Harrison, It didn't say Celeste. It said Isla. If this had gone through, I would have been legally responsible for paying back $450,000, and when I inevitably couldn't pay it, the lender would foreclose, ruining my credit, seizing the assets, and leaving me bankrupt. They were willing to burn my financial future to the ground just to get liquid cash. Scroll down, I said. My voice was unrecognizable. It sounded like grinding stones. Show me the ID. Sarah clicked the attachment tab. For a remote online notarization to be valid, the signer has to present government-issued identification. The system captures a high-resolution image of the front and back. The image loaded. It was a California driver's license. It had my name. It had my date of birth. But the photo I stared at the face on the screen, it was me. But it was a younger, softer version of me. My hair was shorter, chopped in a bob I hadn't worn since I was 27. I looked at the issue date on the digital scan. Issued, May 12, 2018. I remembered that license. I had lost it during a family vacation to Lake Tahoe 5 years ago. I had turned my purse inside out looking for it. My mother had been there, helping me look, making tisk-tisk noises about my carelessness. You really need to be more organized. Isla, we will check the rental car. They had found it. They had found it, and they had kept it. They hadn't returned it to me. They had filed it away in their fireproof safe in Stonegate Heights, along with my birth certificate and my social security card, waiting for a day when they might need to become me. This is expired, I said, pointing at the screen. That license expired 2 years ago. Sarah squinted. No, look at the expiration date in the system data. They manually overrode the OCR red. The notary flagged it as valid per visual inspection. It was a coordinated attack. They had the old ID to flash at the camera, and a corrupt or negligent notary to approve it. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I could not stand there and just look at the screen. I had to secure the perimeter. The paper war was happening here, but the physical war was happening at Tideglass Cove. I dialed the number for the Pelican Crown Management Office. It rang twice before the building manager, a gruff man named Mr. Henderson, picked up. Pelican Crown. Henderson speaking. Mr. Henderson, this is Isla Simmons in 4B. I said, I was cutting straight to the bone. I need you to do something for me immediately. This is a security emergency. Isla, everything okay? No. I said, listen to me. I need you to wipe the entry code for my unit. Delete the guest code I set up. And I need you to go to my door right now. There is a gray lockbox clamped to the railing that I did not authorize. A lockbox? Henderson sounded confused. I saw that. Thought you were selling. I am not selling. I said, cut it off. If you can't cut it, wrap it in duct tape so it can't be opened. And Mr. Henderson, if anyone shows up claiming to be me, or claiming to be my parents, do not let them into the building. Call the police. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the gears turning in his head. He had known my grandfather. He knew the Simmons name. You got it. Isla, he said, his tone shifting from casual to alert. I am heading up there with the bolt cutters now. Nobody gets in. Thank you. I hung up. One door closed, but the digital door was still wide open. Sarah was printing again. The laser printer behind her hummed, spitting out pages of metadata. She gathered the stack and stapled it, the sound sharp and final. Here is the audit trail for the attempted deed of trust, she said, sliding the papers across the counter. We have the IP address, which you saw. But I pulled the submitter profile. I looked at the document. Electronic Recording Delivery System, ERDS. Submitter ID, 884-992-alpha. Authorized filer. I expected to see my father's name again. Harrison loved to put his name on things he owned, but the name on the line wasn't Harrison Simmons. Authorized filer. Sloane Simmons. I froze. Sloane, my sister, my big sister, who sent me memes about wine and complained about her toddlers. Sloane, who always rolled her eyes when Mom got too controlling, but always did what she was told. Isla? Sarah asked gently. Do you know this person? I nodded slowly. It is my sister. Sarah's face softened with sympathy. But I didn't want pity. I wanted clarity. Why? I whispered. Why would Sloane do this? She didn't need the money. Her husband was a surgeon. They lived in a sprawling house 3 streets over from my parents. Sloane had never been malicious. She was just porous. She absorbed the will of whoever was shouting the loudest. Then it clicked. My parents were smart. They knew that if they put their own names on the fraud, and it went sideways, they would be the ones in handcuffs. But if they used Sloane's account? If they set up the e-recording profile in her name? They were using her as a blast shield. They needed a clean face. Harrison and Celeste had credit checks and business reputations to protect. Sloane was a stay-at-home mom with a spotless record and a desire to please. They had likely told her it was just paperwork. Just sign up for this account. Sweetie, it helps us manage the estate tax. You know how complicated it gets. And Sloane, conditioned from birth to never question the financial wisdom of Harrison Simmons, had handed over her identity just like I had handed over my agency for 30 years. Isla, Sarah said, interrupting my spiral. If this was submitted under her login, she is legally liable. This is a felony. I know. I said. I folded the papers and shoved them into my bag. I knew exactly what that meant. If I pursued this, I wouldn't just be taking down my parents. I would be taking down my sister. That was their insurance policy. They knew I would hesitate to hurt Sloane. They were banking on my empathy being stronger than my survival instinct. But they had miscalculated. They had forgotten that Sloane was an adult. And she had made her choice, and I had made mine. I need to go. I said to Sarah, keep the fraud alert active. If they try to blink, I want to know. I will watch it like a hawk. Sarah promised. Good luck. I turned and walked out of the recorder's office, the automatic doors sliding open to hit me with the humid heat of the afternoon. The parking lot was blindingly bright. I made it to my car, threw the bag on the passenger seat, and locked the doors. I felt exposed, as if there were eyes in the dashboard, eyes in the rearview mirror. I looked at the leather suitcase again. It was time. I reached for the cream-colored envelope with the red wax seal. For Isla. Only if they try something. My hands were shaking as I broke the seal. The wax snapped with a dry crack, a sound that felt irreverent, like breaking a bone. I pulled out the contents. There were 3 sheets of paper. The first was a handwritten note on Grandpa's personal stationery. The ink was blue, the handwriting spidery but forceful. Isla, if you are reading this, they have done what I feared. They have tried to take what is yours. Do not be surprised. They are scorpions. Stinging is in their nature. Do not hate them for it, but do not let them sting you twice. I have prepared for their favorite tricks. Harrison loves a power of attorney. He believes he owns you, so he believes he can sign for you. He is wrong. Enclosed is a document I had drafted 6 months ago. I need you to sign it. Date it for today, and record it immediately. It is a blanket revocation. Also, call Miles Corrigan, but if Miles is unavailable, or if this gets ugly in court, and it will, you need a litigator who isn't polite. Go to the firm of Sterling Vance. Ask for the senior partner. I have already paid the retainer. Fight, little bird. The house is just wood and stone. Your freedom is the prize. Granddad. I wiped a hot tear from my cheek. He had known. He had paid a retainer. He had been fighting for me from the grave. I looked at the second document. Revocation of power of attorney. I, Isla Simmons, hereby revoke, cancel, and annul any and all powers of attorney, unrecorded or recorded, previously granted by me to Harrison Simmons, Celeste Simmons, or any other agent, effective immediately. It was a nuclear bomb for their legal strategy. If they were using a forged POA or an old POA I had signed when I was 18 and foolish, this document killed it. If I recorded this today, the timestamp would prove that at the moment they tried to close that loan, they had no authority. I looked at the third paper. It was a card for the law firm. Sterling Vance, a name I knew. They were the sharks of the county. They were the lawyers you hired when you didn't want a settlement. You wanted a surrender. I checked the dashboard clock. 1:45 p.m. The title company. Harborstone. Closed at 5. But wire transfer deadlines usually cut off around 3 or 4. If they were trying to fund this loan today, they were in the final stretch. They had the forged deed. They had the fake POA. They had the compliant notary. They had the clean submitter in Sloan. They were probably popping champagne in Stonegate Heights right now, thinking the glitch with the recording was just a minor hiccup. They didn't know I was sitting in a Honda Civic 5 miles away with the weapon that would sever their puppet strings. I grabbed a pen from the center console. I signed the revocation of power of attorney against the dashboard. My pen tearing slightly through the paper I pressed so hard. I didn't have time to drive to Sterling Vance yet. I had to finish the job here first. I opened the car door. The heat hit me again. But this time it felt like fuel. I wasn't just going to block the sale. I was going to record this revocation, and then I was going to make a phone call that would turn their private showing into a public crime scene. I looked at the phone number for Harborstone Title Escrow on the printout Sarah had given me. 555-0122. I hit the dial button. It was time to introduce myself to the people helping my parents rob me, and I wasn't going to use my indoor voice. The Mariner County Sheriff's substation was a squat, beige brick building nestled between a tire shop and a coffee drive-thru. It was not the main precinct with its bustle of arrests and sirens. This was the administrative heart of law enforcement, the place where crimes were converted into paperwork and paperwork was converted into prosecution. I walked in. The glass door heavy against my shoulder, the air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt like a meat locker, a stark contrast to the humid heat of the parking lot. The lobby was empty save for a row of plastic chairs and a high counter behind bulletproof glass. The deputy on duty was a man who looked like he had seen every possible variation of human dishonesty and found them all exhausting. His name tag read, Deputy E. Rourke. He was young, perhaps early 30s, with a buzz cut and eyes that scanned me with professional detachment. He did not look like the kind of man who would offer me a tissue. He looked like the kind of man who understood that in a fraud case, tears were irrelevant and timestamps were everything. I approached the window. I did not lead with the story of my childhood or the betrayal I felt burning in my chest. I led with the only thing that mattered in this room. I need to file a report for identity theft and real estate fraud. I said, I have the chain of title, the unauthorized recording logs, and a sworn affidavit of false filing from the county recorder. Deputy Rourke blinked. He set down his pen and leaned forward, the boredom evaporating from his face. Most people come in here screaming about stolen lawnmowers, he said. You sound like you brought a case file. I slid the documents through the metal slot at the bottom of the glass. I brought the evidence. I said. He buzzed me through the side door. I sat at a metal desk that smelled of industrial cleaner. Rourke flipped through the stack of papers I had curated. The grant deed from Grandpa, the forged quitclaim deed, the printout of the attempted deed of trust, the metadata logs from Sarah at the recorder's office, the photo of the lockbox I had taken an hour ago. I watched him read. I did not interrupt. I let the silence stretch. I knew that if I started talking about my mother's gaslighting or my father's arrogance, I would lose him. I would become a domestic dispute. I needed to remain a felony victim. He stopped at the printout of the quitclaim deed. He tapped the notary block with his finger. Remote online notarization, he muttered. Virginia Commission. He looked up at me. You are saying you were not in Virginia yesterday? I was in San Francisco at my job. I said, I have my badge swipe logs from my office building if you need them. I was nowhere near a computer at 3:14 in the afternoon. Rourke nodded. He looked at the next page. The attempted mortgage. $450,000, he read, and the borrower is listed as you. Yes, I said, but look at the signature line. He squinted. Attorney in fact. He sat back in his chair, exhaling a long breath through his nose. Okay, let me tell you what I see here. I see a sophisticated conveyance fraud. This is not some junkie stealing mail. This is someone who knows the system. He looked me in the eye. Who is the suspect? I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Harrison and Celeste Simmons. I said, my parents, and potentially my sister. Sloane Simmons, whose account was used for the submission. Rourke did not flinch. He did not say, "Oh, surely it is a misunderstanding." He wrote down their names in his notebook. "Okay," he said. "Here's the good news. You see this Ron stamp? The remote online notarization?" I nodded. "That is your oxygen," he said. "In the old days, if your dad forged your signature on a paper deed and got a crooked notary friend to stamp it in a back room, it would be your word against theirs. We would need handwriting experts. It would be a mess." He tapped the paper again, but with Ron. "Everything is recorded, by law. The entire audio-video session of the signing has to be archived for 10 years. If they signed this yesterday, there is a video of them doing it. There is a video of someone holding up an ID that claims to be you." I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. A video. Grandpa had been right about the paper, but technology had given me something even better. It had given me a movie of the crime. "If there is a video," I said, "then we can see who pretended to be me." "Exactly," Rourke said, "and we can see who was in the room with them." He turned to his computer. "I need to get a preservation request out immediately." These third-party notary platforms are usually compliant, but we do not want the account holder, your sister, logging in and trying to delete the session. He began typing, his fingers moving fast. "I am sending a formal demand to the platform listed here. I am requesting the video, the transaction log, the credential analysis, and the IP audit trail." He paused. "You mentioned an ID." I pulled out the printout Sarah had given me. The scan of the expired license. "They used my old license," I said. "It expired 2 years ago. I lost it on a family trip. My parents, they kept it. For safekeeping. They said." Rourke looked at the image. "Identity theft requires intent." He said, "Keeping an old ID is weird. Using it to secure a $500,000 loan is a felony." He hit print on his preservation request. He stood up and walked to the printer, grabbing the sheet while it was still warm. "I am going to fax this and email it to their legal compliance department right now." He said, "This freezes the evidence. If anyone tries to scrub that server, it becomes a federal obstruction charge." He sat back down and looked at the pending deed of trust again, the one Sarah had managed to reject. "This is the part that worries me," he said, tapping the attorney-in-fact line. "Why?" I asked. "We stopped it. We stopped this specific transaction," Rourke corrected. "But look at the structure. They did not just try to sell the condo. Selling it gets them cash. Sure, but taking out a loan against it?" He leaned in, his voice dropping. "If they sell the condo, the money goes into escrow and then to the seller. It takes time. There are checks. But a cash-out refinance? That money gets wired directly to the borrower. Me." I said, "No," Rourke said. "To the account designated by the borrower. If they have a power of attorney that allows them to bank for you, they could have directed those funds into any account they control. They wanted the $450,000 liquid today, and because the loan is in your name, the debt stays with you." I stared at him. I had thought they were stealing the asset. Rourke was telling me they were stealing my future. "If that loan had closed," he continued, "and they walked away with the cash, you would be left with a mortgage on a property you legally didn't even own anymore because of the quitclaim. You would have the debt, and they would have the title. It is a double tap." I felt cold deep in my marrow. This wasn't just greed. This was an attempt to cripple me. They wanted to strip me of the property Grandpa gave me, and in the process, shackle me to them forever. If I had $500,000 in debt, I would have to crawl back to them. I would have to beg. "That is why I need to record the revocation," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I have a revocation of power of attorney in the car. Get it recorded," Rourke said. "Today. Do not wait for 5 o'clock." He finished typing up the incident report. He printed out a small card with a number on it. Case number, MC 2400911. "This is your shield," he said, handing it to me. If the broker calls, give him this number. If the bank calls, give them this number. If your parents show up at your door, you call 911 and you read this number to the dispatcher. It tells them there is an active fraud investigation. It changes the priority of the call. Thank you. Deputy, I said. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy but stable. One more thing, Rourke said. He wasn't looking at his screen anymore. He was looking at me. These people, they are your family. That makes this dangerous. Strangers rob you and run. Family robs you and stays for dinner. They will try to talk you out of this. They will try to make you feel crazy. He pointed to the stack of evidence. Trust the audit trail, he said. The timestamps do not care who your father is. The video log does not care about your mother's feelings. Stick to the logs. I nodded. I understand. I walked out of the substation. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I felt different than I had when I walked in. I wasn't just Isla anymore. I was case number MC 2400911. I had the state of California behind me. I reached for my car door handle, and my phone buzzed in my bag. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire staccato of vibration that sounded like an angry insect. I pulled it out. Missed call. Mom, 3. Missed call. Dad, 2. And a string of text messages. The fraud alert had hit them. The rejection of the deed had triggered a notification to the submitter. I opened the messages. Dad. Isla, call me immediately. There is a clerical error with the county. We need to fix this before 5. Dad. Pick up the phone. You are making a scene. Mom. Isla. Honey, please answer. The title company is confused. We are just trying to protect your assets. Why are you doing this? Mom. Don't be stubborn. This is for your own good. I scrolled past them. I did not feel the urge to reply. I did not feel the guilt that usually choked me when I ignored them. I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. Then, a new message popped up. From Sloan. Sloan. Isla? Mom is freaking out. She says you're having a breakdown and blocked a transaction. Dad is yelling at someone on the phone about a hold. What is going on? What is Mom talking about? I looked at the message. Sloan didn't know, or she knew enough to be scared, but not enough to understand she was the accessory to a crime. I thumbed a reply to Sloan. I kept it short. I kept it factual. Me. Do not sign anything else. Sloan. Do not log into any accounts they tell you to. I just left the sheriff's station. It is a fraud investigation. I hit send. I watched the delivered receipt appear. Then I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Let it buzz. Let them panic. I had one more stop to make before the sun went down. I had to record the revocation. And then I had a date with a title company that thought they could sell my house without me noticing. I started the engine. The audit trail was my roadmap, and I was going to follow it all the way to the end. I stood in the parking lot of the sheriff's substation, the heat radiating off the asphalt, my phone burning a hole in my hand. I looked at the number for Harborstone Title and Escrow again. If I called them from my car, I was just Isla Simmons, a hysterical woman claiming fraud. They would transfer me to voicemail. They would cite privacy laws. They would stall me while the wire transfer cleared. I needed leverage. I needed weight. I turned around and walked back through the heavy glass doors of the substation. Deputy Rourke looked up from his computer, surprised to see me return so quickly. I need you to stand next to me, I said. I am calling the title company. They are not going to listen to me, but they will listen to a badge number. Rourke didn't hesitate. He understood the physics of authority. He stood up, walked to the counter, and nodded at my phone. Put it on speaker, he said. I placed the phone on the cool laminate counter between us. I dialed the number for Harborstone Title. The ringback tone was chirpy, upbeat, a stark contrast to the felony in progress. Harborstone Title and Escrow. A woman's voice answered. This is Jessica. How can I help you? This is Isla Simmons. I said, I need to speak to your compliance officer immediately regarding a fraudulent transaction in progress on file number. I looked at the printout Sarah had given me. File 884992. There was a pause. The sound of typing. I am sorry. Ms. Simmons, Jessica said, her voice dropping into a rehearsed tone of polite refusal. I see that file is currently in an active signing window. I cannot discuss details with anyone other than the authorized parties on the account. I am the owner of the property. I said, my name is on the deed. The authorized contact on this file is Harrison Simmons, she recited. I can take a message and have the escrow officer call him. She was stonewalling. She was following protocol, and protocol was designed to protect the transaction, not the truth. I looked at Rourke. He leaned down toward the phone, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of the state. Ma'am, this is Deputy Evan Rourke with the Mariner County Sheriff's Office. I am standing here with the victim. You are currently processing a transaction that is the subject of an active criminal investigation for identity theft and mortgage fraud. The silence on the other end was absolute. The chirpy hold music did not return. I have case number MC2400911. Rourke continued. I suggest you transfer us to your compliance manager right now, unless you want to be named as an accessory in the police report I am currently filing. One moment, please. Her voice was shaking. The line clicked. Vivaldi's Four Seasons began to play, tinny and distorted. Rourke looked at me. That usually works, he said. 30 seconds later, the music cut out. The voice that replaced it was not Jessica. It was deeper, sharper. The voice of a woman who wore suits and understood liability. This is Dana Price, compliance manager for Harborstone. I am on the line with Deputy Rourke and Isla Simmons. I added, Ms. Simmons, Dana said. Her tone was guarded but attentive. I have the file open. The receptionist says you are alleging fraud. Talk to me. Keep it brief. I did not waste time with emotions. I spoke in bullet points. 1. I am the legal owner of 12 Pelican Way. Unit 4B. 2. A quitclaim deed, transferring title to Harrison and Celeste Simmons, was recorded yesterday via remote online notarization. That deed is a forgery. I was not present. 3. The Mariner County Recorder has placed a fraud alert on the parcel as of 1 hour ago. 4. Your company attempted to record a deed of trust against the property for $450,000 less than an hour ago. The recorder rejected it. 5. The ID attached to that submission is my expired license from 2 years ago. I stopped. I let the data hang in the air. I could hear Dana Price typing on the other end. It was a fast, aggressive clatter. I see the rejection log, Dana said. She sounded like she was reading a diagnosis. Rejection code. Manual, hold/fraud, flag. She paused. The typing stopped. Ms. Simmons, she said, and her voice had shifted. It was no longer guarded. It was alarmed. You said you did not authorize the quitclaim? No, I said. And you did not authorize the loan application? No. Dana exhaled. Okay, I am looking at the escrow instructions. Ms. Simmons, you need to know what is happening right now. We have a signing agent scheduled to meet with the borrowers at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I looked at the clock on the wall of the substation. It was 2:15. Where? I asked. Where is the meeting? The address on file is in Stonegate Heights, Dana said, but that is not the biggest problem. What is the biggest problem? I asked. Dana hesitated. I could hear paper shuffling. There is not just one file, she said. The room seemed to tilt. Rourke frowned, leaning closer to the phone. What do you mean? Rourke asked. This is a dual-track submission, Dana explained. It is a strategy sometimes used to expedite liquidity. We have 2 open escrow files for this property. 2? I asked. File A is a sale, Dana said. Seller listed as Harrison and Celeste Simmons. Buyer is an LLC called Cobalt Shore Holdings. That file relies on the quitclaim deed being valid. She took a breath. File B is a cash-out refinance. Borrower listed as Isla Simmons. This file relies on a power of attorney granting authority to Harrison Simmons to sign for you. My head was spinning. They were not just trying one door. They were trying every door in the house at once. Why 2? I asked. Why would they do both? Because they do not know which one will clear title faster. Dana said, if the sale goes through, they get the purchase price from the LLC. If the refinance goes through, they get the loan proceeds from the bank. They are racing the clock. They want the cash in hand today. So if the quitclaim fails, I said, realizing the horror of their plan, they fall back on the power of attorney and load the debt onto me. Exactly, Dana said. And here's the kicker. The lender for the refinance? It is a hard money lender. Private equity, they do not check as thoroughly as a big bank. They fund fast. That is why the deed of trust was submitted today. They are trying to force the funding before the close of business. I felt a wave of nausea. Hard money, high interest, predatory terms. They were going to shackle me to a loan shark. Freeze it, I said. Freeze everything. I am doing that right now. Dana said, I am placing a hard stop on both files. I am flagging the accounts for internal fraud review. I am contacting the signing service to cancel the appointment at 4 o'clock. She typed loudly as she spoke. File frozen. Disbursement locked. E-recording account suspended. She paused. Ms. Simmons, for my file. I need you to send me a written dispute immediately. I need the case number the deputy gave you, a copy of the fraud alert from the county, and a statement that you deny the validity of both the quitclaim and the power of attorney. Can you do that? I can do it right now. I said, what is your email? She gave it to me, d-price@harborstone.com. I will send it from the car. I said, and Ms. Simmons? Dana added. Her voice was low. If there is a power of attorney involved, you need to revoke it legally. A verbal stop works for me, but it does not work for the rest of the world. I have the revocation signed. I said, I am going to the recorder's office next. Good, Dana said. Get it on the record. I will hold these funds. Nobody is getting a dime today. Thank you, I said. I hung up. The silence in the substation felt heavy. Rourke looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't just professional respect anymore. It was shared anger. 2 files, he said, shaking his head. That is distinct intent. That is not an accident. That is a calculated attempt to defraud you whichever way the wind blows. They wanted to win. I said, they did not care how. Rourke pointed to the door. Go send that email. Then go record your revocation. I will handle the subpoena for the video logs. I walked out to the parking lot for the second time. The heat was still there, but I felt cold. My parents were not just controlling, they were tactical. They had set up a pincer movement to destroy my financial life. I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda. I pulled out my phone. I drafted the email to Dana Price. Subject: Fraud Dispute. Files: 884992/884993, Isela Simmons. To Dana Price. As discussed, I am the owner of the property. I dispute all pending transactions. Attached is the sheriff's case number, the fraud affidavit from the recorder, and my statement of denial regarding the quitclaim and the power of attorney. I am not selling. I am not borrowing. I am being robbed. I attached the photos I had taken of the documents. I hit send. A moment later, a notification pinged back. From Dana Price. Subject: Fraud dispute, received. Both files are formally frozen. Fraud investigation initiated. We have notified the lender. I stared at the screen. Frozen. It was a victory. A massive one. I had stopped the wire transfer. I had stopped the sale. But as I looked at the words, fraud investigation initiated, I knew it wasn't over. My parents were not the kind of people who saw a stop sign and hit the brakes. They saw a stop sign and looked for a detour. They had a signing agent coming at 4 o'clock. They had a buyer, this mysterious Cobalt Shore Holdings, waiting for a deal. They had a hard money lender expecting a return. When Dana canceled that appointment, when the money didn't hit their account, the polite mask was going to drop completely. I checked the time, 2:25. I had cut off their money. Now I had to cut off their legal authority. I put the car in reverse. The recorder's office was 10 minutes away. I needed to record the revocation. I needed to make sure that even if they forged another signature, Even if they found another crooked notary, the system would reject them. My phone buzzed again. Mom. Isla, we are worried about you. Why did the title company just send us a cancellation notice? Mom. Harrison is very upset. You are embarrassing the family. Embarrassing the family. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that frightened me. I wasn't embarrassing the family. I was evicting it. I drove toward the government center. The paper war was escalating, and I was just getting started. My phone was sitting on the passenger seat, vibrating against the leather with a persistence that made my teeth ache. It was not the angry, demanding buzz of my mother, nor the curt, authoritative summons of my father. It was Sloan. I pulled over into the shade of a magnolia tree just outside the government center complex. I needed to focus. I took a breath that tasted of recycled air conditioning and stale adrenaline, and I answered, Isla? Sloan's voice was high, tight, and skating on the edge of hyperventilation. It was the voice of the little sister who used to wake me up during thunderstorms, terrified of the noise. But she was 32 years old now, and the storm she was standing in was entirely man-made. Isla. Oh my God, she said, the words tumbling out over each other. Dad is screaming at someone on the other line. Mom is pacing the kitchen saying, you have lost your mind. What is happening? Why did I get an email saying my account is suspended? I gripped the phone tighter. Listen to me, Sloan. I need you to breathe. Where are you? I am at home, she said. The kids are napping. Isla. Dad told me this was just tax paperwork. He said you were overwhelmed with the property transfer and that we were helping you structure it so you would not get hit with capital gains. I closed my eyes. It was so elegant. It was so Harrison Simmons. He had not just asked her to sign. He had framed it as an act of charity. He had weaponized Sloan's desire to be helpful against me. He lied to you. I said. My voice was flat, hard. It is not tax paperwork. You were listed as the authorized filer on a fraudulent deed transfer and a mortgage application. You were about to help them steal the condo and saddle me with $500,000 in debt. There was a silence on the line, heavy and horrified. No, Sloan whispered. No. He said it was a trust arrangement. He said he was acting as your agent because you were too busy at work to handle the notary sessions. Sloan, I said, did you sign anything? Did you log into a portal? She hesitated. I set up the account. He sent me a link. He said he needed a clean profile because his business accounts were too cluttered with commercial properties. He told me to create the login, verify my email, and then give him the password so he could upload the documents for you. I felt a surge of nausea. They had used her name like a clean shirt to cover a dirty deed. They had set her up as the fall guy. If the police came knocking, the digital footprint would lead straight to Sloan's laptop, while Harrison and Celeste could claim ignorance. Do not give him any more codes, I said. Do not log in. Do not verify anything. Isla, the police. Mom says you called the police? I did. I said, because this is a felony. Sloan. And right now, your name is all over it. I could hear her start to cry. A jagged, terrified sound. I am going to jail? Isla. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. I said, and because I believe you, I am going to tell you exactly how to save yourself. But you have to do exactly what I say. No more trying to please them. You have to pick a side. What do I do? She sobbed. I need evidence. I said, I need you to take screenshots of everything he sent you. The email with the link, the text messages where he told you what to do, the login confirmation, everything. Send it to me right now. Okay. She sniffed. Okay, I am doing it. I waited. The seconds stretched out, agonizingly long. I watched a squirrel run across the hood of my car, oblivious to the fact that two sisters were dismantling a lifetime of family loyalty over a cellular network. My phone pinged, once, twice, 3 times. I opened the images. The first was a text from Dad, dated 2 days ago. Sloan, sweetheart, need a favor. Helping Isla with the condo taxes. Need a fresh email to route the filing so it doesn't get mixed up with my firm's audit. Can you set up a quick profile? Link follows. The second image was the link. I zoomed in. It looked like a standard document signing portal. The logo was blue and gold, mimicking a major electronic signature company. But when I looked at the URL, the blood drained from my face. It was not DocuSign.com. It was DocuSign SecurePortalWeb.net. It was a phishing site, a spoof, a fake portal designed to harvest credentials and mimic a legitimate transaction. My father hadn't just used a public service. He, or someone he hired, had directed Sloane to a counterfeit platform to make the fake notary session look real to her. Sloane, I said, staring at the screen, this website is fake. It is a trap. I forwarded the images immediately to Dana Price at the title company and to Deputy Rourke. I typed a quick caption, evidence of method. My sister was directed to a spoof domain by the suspects. My phone pinged again. It was another screenshot from Sloane. This one was a text from our mother. Sent 5 minutes ago. Sloane, do not listen to Isla. She is having one of her episodes. You know how she gets when she is stressed. She is unstable. We are just trying to protect her assets before she does something reckless. We are handling it. Just ignore her calls. I stared at the words. Episodes. Unstable. They were not just stealing my house. They were stealing my sanity. They were building a narrative where I was the crazy daughter, the loose cannon, and they were the benevolent guardians stepping in to save me from myself. It was the same story they had told when I wanted to go to art school, when I wanted to move to the city, when I wanted to date someone they didn't approve of. Isla is emotional. Isla doesn't understand the real world. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest. It was cleaner than grief. It was sharper than betrayal. Sloane, I asked, my voice steady, do you think I am unstable? No, she said, her voice small. Do you think I am having an episode? I don't know. Isla, Mom sounds so worried. She is crying. She says you are going to ruin your financial future. I took a deep breath. Sloane, did you ever see the deed Grandpa gave me? The line went quiet. What deed? She asked. The grant deed, I said. The one he signed 2 weeks before he died. The one where he gave me the condo. Explicitly, legally. Did Mom and Dad ever show you that? No, she said. They told me Grandpa died without a will for the condo, and that it went to Dad as the next of kin. They said you were staying there to help clean it out. I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. Of course they did. They rewrote history before the ink was even dry. He gave it to me. Sloane, I have the paper. I have the recording number. I have the lawyer. They lied to you. They lied to you about the ownership. They lied to you about the taxes. And they lied to you about the website. I let that sink in. I needed her to feel the weight of the deception. Sloane, think back. The ID, the driver's license they used to impersonate me. How did they get it? I could hear her breathing, jagged and shallow. I don't know. Dad keeps all the old files in the safe. Think. I urged, did he ever ask you for anything? Anything regarding my identification? There was a long pause. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, she whispered. What? Last year? She said, during the summer, Dad called me. He said he was updating the umbrella insurance policy for the whole family. He said the broker needed current copies of everyone's IDs to bind the coverage. I gripped the steering wheel. And he said he couldn't get a hold of you because you were hiking. She continued. He asked if I had a photo of your license on my phone from when we rented the car in Napa. I remembered that trip. I remembered handing Sloane my license at the rental counter because my hands were full of luggage. She had snapped a picture of it to email to the agency. You sent it to him, I said. I just forwarded the old email. She stammered. I didn't think anything of it. He said it was for insurance. He said he was saving us money on premiums. He was harvesting the data. I said, he was building the kit. He got the ID from you. He got the login from you. He used you to build the keys to the kingdom. Sloane. I heard the sound of retching on the other end. She was physically sick. The illusion of the benevolent, protective father was dissolving. leaving behind the cold machinery of a con artist. Isla, she choked out. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Apologies don't fix felonies. Sloan, I said, but statements do. What do you mean? I am at the recorder's office. I said, I have already filed an affidavit. Deputy Rourke has opened a criminal file. He knows your name is on the submission. He knows about the account. Sloan let out a whimper, but I continued, my voice firm. He also knows that you are likely a pawn. He suspects coercion or deception, but he needs to hear it from you. I can't, she said. I can't talk to the police against Dad. It will kill him. He is the one who put you in the line of fire, I shouted, losing my cool for the first time. He put his own daughter in a position to be charged with mortgage fraud. He didn't care if you went to jail. Sloan, as long as he got the cash. Do you understand that? He used you as a human shield. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. I waited. I watched a cloud drift over the sun, casting a shadow over the government building. Finally, Sloan spoke. Her voice was different. It wasn't the scared little sister anymore. It was hollow, scraped clean of illusions. What do I need to do? She asked. You need to write a statement. I said, a voluntary statement. You need to write down exactly what you told me. That Dad asked you to open the account, that he told you it was for taxes, that he sent you the link, that you provided the ID photo under false pretenses of insurance. I paused. And you need to send it to Deputy Rourke. Today, before 5 o'clock. If I do that, she hesitated. If I do that, Dad goes down. If you don't do that, I said, you go down with him, and I won't be able to stop it. There was a buzzing sound in the background on her end. Another text message. It is Mom again, Sloan said dully. What does it say? Sloan. Pick up. We need you to sign one more verification code. The system timed out. Do it now. They were still trying. Even with the holds. Even with the frozen accounts. They were frantically trying to push buttons, hoping to brute force the theft before the sun went down. They were desperate. Don't answer her, I said. Write the statement. Sloan, save yourself. Okay, she said. I am doing it. I am doing it now. She hung up. I sat there in the silence of my car, staring at the phone. I felt a strange, hollow ache in my chest. I had just recruited my sister to destroy our parents. I had just turned the family against itself, but then I looked at the text my mother had sent her. Isla is unstable. We are protecting her. They had fired the first shot. They had been firing shots for 30 years, disguised as love. I was just finally firing back. I started the car. I had one more document to record, the revocation, and then I would wait for the fireworks. I drove the short distance to the parking structure of the recorder's office. My phone pinged one last time. It was a copy of an email. From Sloan Simmons to Deputy Evan Rourke. Subject, Voluntary Statement, Case MC 2400911, to whom it may concern. My name is Sloan Simmons. I am writing this to clarify my involvement in the property filings regarding 12 Pelican Way. I acted under the direct instruction of Harrison Simmons, who informed me these were tax documents. I read the first paragraph. I didn't need to read the rest. Sloan had flipped. The clean face had just become the prosecution's star witness. I walked toward the building with the envelope containing the revocation in my hand. The air felt different now. It didn't smell like ocean or exhaust. It smelled like the end of something, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the ruin. I was welcoming it. I stood at the counter of the recorder's office, the signed revocation of power of attorney resting under my hand like a loaded weapon. Sarah, the supervisor, was finalizing the intake stamps on my fraud affidavit. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and thick with the tension of a storm that had not yet fully broken. Then, the automatic doors at the far end of the room hissed open. Sarah looked up from her monitor. Her eyes widened slightly, darting from the door to me, and then back to the door. Ms. Simmons, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Is that him? I turned slowly. Walking into the fluorescent glare of the government basement was my father. Harrison Simmons looked exactly as he always did, immaculate. He was wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that probably cost more than the monthly salary of the clerk he was approaching. He carried a manila envelope tucked under his arm with the casual confidence of a man who owned the building, the land it sat on, and the people inside it. He did not look like a man who had just committed a felony. He looked like a man arriving to chair a board meeting. He spotted me. For a second. His step faltered, just a fraction of a second, a micro-stutter in his stride that betrayed surprise. He had not expected me to be here. He had expected me to be at work, crying in a bathroom stall, or perhaps at home, paralyzed by the gaslighting text messages my mother was bombarding me with. But he recovered instantly. The mask slid back into place. He smiled. That familiar, broad, benevolent smile that had charmed investors and silenced dissenters for 40 years. "Isla," he said. His voice boomed slightly in the quiet room, commanding attention. "Thank God you are here. I was just coming to fix this mess." He walked straight past me, ignoring the rigid set of my shoulders, and approached the counter. He placed the manila envelope on the laminate surface and leaned in. Treating Sarah like a secretary, he was about to charm into working overtime. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. "Harrison Simmons. I am the father. There has been a terrible clerical misunderstanding regarding the filing for the Tide Glass Cove property. My daughter—" He gestured vaguely in my direction without looking at me. "My daughter is a bit overwhelmed with the estate management. We need to file a corrective deed to clear up the chain of title so we can proceed with the sale." He reached into the envelope and pulled out a document. It was thick, heavy paper. Corrective grant deed. He was trying to override the fraud alert. He was trying to file a correction that would validate the forged quitclaim by claiming the error was technical, not criminal. It was a bold, arrogant move. I did not move. I did not scream. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It is not a misunderstanding. "Harrison," I said. I did not call him Dad. He turned to me, his smile tightening at the edges. "Isla, honey, please, not here. We can discuss this at home. You are making a scene in a county office. It is embarrassing. The word embarrassing. His greatest fear. This condo is a liability. Isla," he continued, his voice dropping to that reasonable lecture hall tone he used when I was a teenager. "You have no idea what the upkeep costs. The assessment fees alone are going to drown you. Your mother and I are trying to liquidity the asset so we can put the money into a trust for you. You are not thinking clearly." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had paid for my college, the man who I had spent my entire life trying to please, and I saw him for what he was, a man who viewed people as assets and relationships as transactions. "I am thinking very clearly," I said. "I am thinking that you forged my signature yesterday. I am thinking you used Sloan to cover your tracks." His eyes flashed cold. A flicker of genuine anger broke through the polish. "Leave your sister out of this," he snapped. Deputy Rourke stepped out from the shadows of the partition wall. "Mr. Simmons," the deputy said. Harrison jumped. He hadn't seen the uniform. He spun around, and for the first time, I saw the color drain from his face. "Deputy," Harrison said, recovering his posture. "I am glad you are here. My daughter is having a bit of a mental health crisis. She is blocking a lawful transaction and—" "Step away from the counter." "Mr. Simmons," Rourke said. His voice was not loud, but it was absolute. Harrison blinked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Step back." Rourke moved closer, placing himself physically between my father and the clerk. "We have an active investigation. Case number MC 2400911. You are named as a suspect in a felony identity theft and mortgage fraud inquiry." Harrison laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. "Felony?" "Deputy, be serious. This is a family dispute. I am her father. I have power of attorney." I stepped forward. "No, You don't. I said. I placed the document I had been holding onto the counter. I am recording this right now. I told Sarah. Revocation of power of attorney. Effective immediately. Sarah took the document. She stamped it with a loud, rhythmic thud. Received. I looked at Harrison. It is gone. I said, You have no power. You have no authority. And the deed you just tried to hand the clerk? The one you called a correction? I pointed to the fraud affidavit sitting next to Sarah's elbow. The record is flagged. Harrison, you cannot fix it. You cannot sell it. You cannot borrow against it. Harrison looked at the stamped revocation. He looked at the deputy. The charm was evaporating, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. He turned back to me, and his face contorted into a mask of tragic disappointment. Isla, he said, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion. How can you be so selfish? This isn't about me. This is for Sloane's future. I didn't blink. Sloane? I asked. Yes, Sloane, he hissed. Her husband's practice is struggling. They have 3 children. This sale was going to set up an education fund for your nieces and nephew. We were doing this for the family, and you are standing here, hoarding a beach house you use 2 weekends a year, taking food out of their mouths. It was a masterful performance. He was trying to pivot, to make me the villain who was hurting innocent children. He was trying to leverage my guilt. But he didn't know I had already spoken to Sloane. He didn't know she had already sent the email to the deputy. Stop it, I said. My voice was quiet. Cutting through his noise, Sloane didn't know about the sale. You told her it was tax paperwork. You lied to her, just like you lied to me. Harrison's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a fish on a dock. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. A text message from Mom. Mom, check the attachment. I opened it. It was a photograph of the front door of my condo at Tide Glass Cove. The brass handle, the one I had polished last week, was gone. In its place was a shiny, heavy-duty smart lock with a keypad. A lock I did not buy. A lock I did not install. Below the photo was a message. Mom, we had to secure the property. You are not in a state to manage it. We will give you the code when you calm down and apologize to your father. I felt the blood rush to my face. They had physically breached the property. While I was here fighting the paper war, they had sent a locksmith, or done it themselves, to lock me out of my own home. I held the phone up so Rourke could see it. My mother just sent this. I said, They changed the locks. Rourke looked at the screen. He looked at Harrison. Mr. Simmons, Rourke said, his tone hardening. Did you authorize a lock change on 12 Pelican Way? Harrison straightened his tie. We have a duty to secure the asset. Isla is unstable. We cannot have her wandering in and out. That is unlawful interference with possession. Rourke interrupted. That is a criminal trespass. That property belongs to Isla Simmons. You have no legal right to restrict her access. It is for her own safety, Harrison shouted. The volume in the room spiked. I want the code. I said, Give me the code to the lock. Harrison sneered. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. No, Mr. Simmons, Rourke warned, his hand drifting toward his belt. Not a weapon, but the radio. It is my property, Harrison yelled. I paid the down payment for my father 20 years ago. It is Simmons' family property. She has no right to it. Sarah, the supervisor, stood up behind the glass. She hit a key on her keyboard. The printer whirred. She walked to the window and slapped a piece of paper against the glass. Facing Harrison. It was a screenshot of the county database. Status: Fraud alert. Recording hold active. Owner of record: Isla Simmons. Read the screen, Mr. Simmons, Sarah said, her voice sharp as a razor. The county says it is hers. The law says it is hers. And right now, this office says you are done. Harrison stared at the paper. He stared at the bold letters. The reality of the bureaucracy was finally piercing his delusion. He was losing. He was losing in the one place he thought he could always manipulate: the system. He breathed heavily, his chest heaving. He looked at his watch. Then, He muttered something. It was soft, almost under his breath. But in the quiet room, it landed like a grenade. "I missed the cutoff," he whispered. I watched him. The cutoff? The cutoff for what? He looked up, and for a second, the arrogance was gone. In its place was sheer, naked panic. "Isla, please," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. The liquidity event, the deadline is today at 5. If I don't show the collateral," he stopped himself. He realized he had said too much, but I had heard it. Collateral. He wasn't selling the condo to help Sloan. He wasn't selling it to pay for taxes. He wasn't even selling it just because he was greedy. He was selling it because he owed money. He needed the cash today, not next week. Today. That was why there were 2 files at the title company. That was why they had tried the hard money loan. That was why he was here, sweating in a suit, risking a felony charge. He was leveraged. My rich, successful, perfect father was in trouble, and he had looked at my inheritance not as a home, but as a life raft to save himself from drowning. "You are in debt," I said. It wasn't a question. Harrison stiffened. "Don't be ridiculous." "You are," I said, stepping closer. "You promised this asset to someone else, didn't you? You needed the $450,000 to cover a margin call or a bad investment. That is why you are panicked." "I am not panicked," he shouted. "I am trying to save this family from ruin." The truth hung there, ugly and undeniable. He had been willing to sacrifice me, sacrifice Sloan, and sacrifice Grandpa's legacy just to plug a hole in his own sinking ship. Deputy Rourke stepped forward. "Mr. Simmons, I am going to ask you one more time. Give your daughter the code to the lock, or I'm going to dispatch a unit to the property to break the door down, and I will add a vandalism charge to your file." Harrison looked at the deputy. He looked at me. He looked at the clock on the wall. 2:45. He realized he wasn't going to make the deadline. The money wasn't coming. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed something and held the screen up to me. Code 7724. "Grandpa's birthday," I whispered. "You used Grandpa's birthday to lock me out of his house." Harrison put the phone away. He smoothed his jacket. He tried to summon the dignity he had walked in with, but it was tattered now. "You will regret this, Isla," he said coldly. "When the dust settles, you will realize you have destroyed this family." I looked at him, and I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, no love. Just the indifference you feel for a stranger who tries to cut you in line. The family was destroyed the moment you signed my name. I said. Harrison turned and walked out. The automatic doors hissed open and closed behind him. I stood there, shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Sarah spoke from behind the glass. "Ms. Simmons?" I turned. "I recorded the revocation," she said softly. "It is done. He can't sign for you. Not now. Not ever." "Thank you," I said. Rourke looked at me. He looked impressed. He mentioned a deadline. Rourke said, "That gives us motive. I'm going to add that to the file. Financial distress makes people desperate." He was desperate. I agreed. "But he is not done," Rourke warned. "Desperate men do not stop until they hit a wall." I checked my phone. The photo of the new lock was still on the screen. "I am going to Tide Glass Cove," I said. "I need to get into my house before he tries anything else." "Be careful," Rourke said. I nodded. I walked out of the recorder's office. I had won the battle of the paperwork, but the war was still waiting for me at the beach. The engine of my car was running, but I was not moving. I was sitting in the parking lot of the recorder's office, watching the automatic doors where my father had just exited. Defeated, but not destroyed. He had mentioned a deadline. He had mentioned collateral. The panic in his eyes was the most honest thing he had shown me in 3 decades. I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out the cream-colored envelope again. I had used the revocation. Now I needed the man. I dialed the number written in Grandpa's shaky block letters. Miles Corrigan, attorney at law. The phone rang once, twice. "Isla," a gravelly voice answered. "I have been expecting this call since about 9 this morning. He didn't ask who it was. He didn't ask why I was calling. Grandpa told you? I asked. Walter told me that Harrison is a man who builds castles on sand, Miles said. And when the tide comes in, he doesn't build a wall. He steals someone else's bricks. Walter paid my retainer 5 years in advance. Isla. So, tell me, did they try the quitclaim or the power of attorney? Both. I said. Miles let out a low, dry chuckle that sounded like sandpaper on wood. Of course they did. Greedy and inefficient. Where are you? I'm at the recorder's office. I said. I filed a fraud affidavit. I recorded the revocation of power of attorney, and I just had a confrontation with my father in the lobby. He tried to file a corrective deed. Good, Miles said. You held the line. Now, I am going to launch the offensive. I am filing a quiet title action within the hour. What does that do? I asked. It is a lawsuit that effectively freezes the property. Miles explained. It asks the court to establish your ownership once and for all, and to invalidate any competing claims. But more importantly, I am filing for an immediate temporary restraining order against your parents. A restraining order? I asked. Against my own parents? Financial restraining order. Miles corrected. It prohibits them from taking any action regarding the property, contacting any lenders, or communicating with the homeowners association. If they send so much as an email about Unit 4B after the judge signs this, they go to jail for contempt, not for fraud, for contempt. And judges hate contempt. I felt a wave of relief. This was the heavy artillery. I need you to send me photos of everything you have, Miles said. The deed, the logs, the text messages. I am serving notice to everyone. The HOA, the insurance carrier, and every title company in the Tri-County area. We are going to make that condo radioactive. No one will touch it. I sent him the files while we were on the line. As the progress bar loaded, a new call beeped in. It was Dana Price from Harborstone Title. Miles, I said, I have the compliance officer from the title company on the other line. Merge the calls. Miles commanded. I want to hear this. I tapped the screen. Dana? I have my attorney. Miles Corrigan. On the line. Ms. Simmons, Dana said, her voice brisk and professional. Mr. Corrigan, I have an update from our digital forensics team regarding the remote online notarization session. Go ahead, Miles said. We pulled the audit log from the platform. Dana said, It is ugly. The session was flagged by the system's automated identity verification software. The ID your father uploaded, the expired license, triggered a mismatch alert. So how did it go through? I asked. The notary overrode it. Dana said, There is a manual override code entered at 3:14 p.m. We checked the notary's credentials. He is a remote agent based in Virginia who has done a high volume of transactions for a specific filtered list of clients. We suspect he is a rubber stamp for hire. He is a co-conspirator, Miles corrected. I want his name and his commission number added to the defendant list. We are already drafting the report for the Secretary of State, Dana confirmed. But there is more. The signing agent who was supposed to meet the buyers today? She called in. She said she received a frantic call from Harrison Simmons 10 minutes ago, offering her triple her fee if she would meet him at a coffee shop instead of the condo. He is trying to move the closing. I said, He knows I locked the condo. We terminated her assignment, Dana said. But Mr. Corrigan, you should know about the buyer. The buyer? I asked. You mean the fake LLC? Cobalt Shore Holdings, Dana said. We ran a conflict check on the entity. It is not a standard investment vehicle. It is a shell company registered in Delaware, but the principal address traces back to a private lending firm in San Francisco called Vantage Point Capital. I heard Miles make a noise of recognition. Vantage Point, he muttered. That explains the desperation. You know them? I asked. They are sharks. Isla, Miles said. They are a hard money lender of last resort. They lend to developers who have maxed out their credit lines with real banks. Their interest rates are predatory, and their collateral terms are brutal. He paused, and I could hear the sound of him typing on a keyboard. I am looking at the court index, Miles said. Harrison has a judgment against him from Vantage Point. Filed 3 months ago. $1.2 million. $1.2 million, I repeated. The number was staggering. He is underwater, Miles said. He probably put up his own house in Stonegate Heights as collateral, and he is defaulting. Vantage Point gave him a deadline. Pay up, or we take your house. So he offered them mine. I realized. Exactly, Miles said. That is why Cobalt Shore is the buyer. It is not a sale. It is a surrender. He is trading your asset to pay his debt. It is a deed in lieu of foreclosure. But he is using a property he doesn't own to settle a debt he can't pay. It was a chess move of pure survival. Harrison wasn't just greedy. He was drowning, and he had decided that I was the life jacket he would shred to keep himself afloat. Isla, Dana interrupted. I have one more thing. The metadata on the submission. We found a routing request for the final policy. What does that mean? I asked. It means they tried to control where the paperwork went after the deal closed, Dana explained. They listed the mailing address for the final recorded deed as Post Office Box 492 in Tideglass Cove. I know that box, I said. My parents have had it for years. I hung up with Dana and Miles, promising to stay in the car until the temporary restraining order was filed. But I needed to check one more flank. I called the Pelican Crown Homeowners Association. The office was usually closed by now, but the property manager, Brenda, picked up. Pelican Crown HOA. Brenda said, Brenda, this is Isla Simmons in 4B. Oh, Isla, Brenda sounded cheerful, which made my stomach turn. We just sent out the estoppel letter your father requested. I hope the sale goes smoothly. My hand tightened on the phone. Estoppel letter. That was the document the HOA provided to confirm that all dues were paid, so a property could be sold. Brenda, I said, keeping my voice calm. When did he request that? Last week, she said. He sent over a form signed by you authorizing us to release the info to the title company, and he asked us to update the mailing address for all future billing to a P.O. box. He said you were traveling and didn't want mail piling up, a form signed by me, another forgery, and the address change. Brenda. I said, I did not sign that form. I am not selling, and I am not traveling. There was a silence. What? He rerouted my mail. Brenda, I said, that is why I didn't see the newsletter. That is why I didn't get the meeting notice. He changed my address in your system so I wouldn't know what was happening. Oh my God, Brenda whispered. He was so polite. He brought donuts for the office. He is stealing the condo. Brenda, I said, I need you to reverse that address change immediately. And if anyone asks for an estoppel letter, you tell them the property is under a fraud investigation. I will. Isla, I am so sorry. I will flag the unit right now. I hung up. They had thought of everything. They had severed my lines of communication. They had forged my permission. They had redirected my mail. It was a siege, planned weeks in advance, executed with a smile and a box of donuts. My phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Miles. Subject: filed. Case number: CV240044. Attached: temporary restraining order, complaint to quiet title. Isla. The judge signed the TRO. The sheriff is serving your parents right now. They are legally paralyzed. I stared at the screen. It was done. The legal wall was up. But then, another email came through. This one was from Dana Price. Subject: evidence. Ron Session, video, attached. Video, file. Jan, 22, session, 3, 14.mp4 Isla. We got the video from the platform before they could scrub it. Watch the last 30 seconds. Audio is key. I hesitated. Did I want to see this? Did I want to see the person wearing my face? I tapped the file. The video player opened. It was a grainy webcam recording. In the center of the frame sat a woman. She was wearing a wig, a dark bob that looked like my hair from 5 years ago. She was wearing oversized sunglasses. She looked vaguely like me, but the jawline was wrong. She held up the driver's license to the camera. The glare obscured the details. But I knew it was my old ID. Then, the notary spoke. His voice was tinny. "Okay, Ms. Simmons, I need you to confirm that you are signing this quitclaim deed of your own free will." The woman in the wig nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I need a verbal yes." "Ma'am," the notary said. The woman hesitated. She looked off camera. To the left of the screen. Her eyes darted nervously. Then, I heard it. It was a whisper, caught by the sensitive microphone of the laptop. It was a voice I had heard every day of my childhood. A voice that had told me to sit up straight, to stop crying, to be grateful. Say yes. "You idiot, we are on a timer." It was Harrison. He was in the room. He was standing right there, just out of frame, directing the fraud like a movie director. The woman cleared her throat. "Yes," she said. "And do you acknowledge that you are transferring this property to Harrison and Celeste Simmons?" The woman looked off camera again. This time, there was another voice, softer, more soothing. "It's okay, sweetie. Just say yes. Then we can go get lunch. My mother, Celeste, she was there too. She wasn't just a passive beneficiary. She was the comfort crew for the imposter." I watched the woman on the screen say, "Yes." I watched the digital stamp appear. I paused the video. I zoomed in on the edge of the frame, on the left side where the woman kept looking. There, just barely visible in the corner of the shot, was a reflection in a mirror hanging on the wall of the room they were in. It was a reflection of a man in a blue polo shirt, holding a stack of papers, and next to him, a woman in a floral dress. Harrison and Celeste, caught in the reflection of their own crime scene. I took a screenshot of the reflection. I forwarded the video and the screenshot to Miles and Deputy Rourke. Me. "I have positive ID on the suspects. They are in the room. Audio confirms coercion." I put the phone down. My hands were shaking. But not from shock, from vindication. Grandpa had left me a beach house, but he had also left me the truth. He knew they would come for it. He knew they would strip the varnish off their perfect lives to get to the gold underneath. I looked at the time. 3:30. The deadline was 5 o'clock. Harrison needed that money to save his own skin, and now he had a restraining order, a frozen title, and a video of himself committing a felony heading to the district attorney. I started the car. I wasn't going home to hide. I was going to Tideglass Cove. I was going to sit on my balcony, and I was going to wait for the storm to break. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to get wet. The gavel did not bang. It simply rested on the mahogany block, held by a judge whose expression had shifted from administrative boredom to profound disgust. We were in Superior Court Department 7 for the emergency hearing on the temporary restraining order. It was 48 hours after the confrontation at the recorder's office, but the timeline felt compressed, as if the last 2 days had been a single. Breathless hour. Harrison and Celeste were there. They sat on the opposite side of the aisle, not touching. My father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The charcoal suit that usually signaled his invincibility now looked like a costume he had outgrown. His skin was gray, the color of wet ash. My mother, Celeste, wore sunglasses inside the courtroom. She was gripping her Hermes bag as if it were the last life preserver on the Titanic. My lawyer, Miles Corrigan, stood at the podium. He did not shout. He did not pace. He simply laid the bricks of the wall that would imprison them. "Your Honor," Miles began, his voice scraping against the silence of the room. "We are not dealing with a simple property dispute. We are dealing with a systemic, multi-layered conspiracy to defraud the plaintiff, Isla Simmons, of her primary residence." He projected the evidence onto the screen. First came the audit trail from the recorder's office. The red stamp of the fraud hold looked like a gunshot wound on the screen. Next came the IP logs. Miles pointed to the highlighted line, the attempted submission of the deed of trust. Miles explained, timed at 2:53 p.m. on Tuesday. The IP address traces directly to a residential router in Stonegate Heights. The billing address for that internet service account is Harrison Simmons. He let that sink in. There was no hacker. There was no clerical error. The call was coming from inside the house. Then came the photo of the spoofed website. The one Sloan had sent me, Your Honor. Miles continued. The defendants did not act alone. They deceived their other daughter, Sloan Simmons, directing her to a counterfeit domain designed to mimic a legitimate signing portal. This was a phishing attack executed by parents against their own children. The judge shifted in his chair. Leaning forward, I had never seen a judge look personally offended before. He looked at Harrison over his reading glasses. Mr. Simmons? The judge asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Do you have a defense for this? Harrison's lawyer, a man who looked like he regretted taking the case, stood up. Your Honor, my client contends that he had verbal authorization to manage the asset and that the methods used were simply unconventional estate planning measures. Unconventional, the judge repeated. Forgery is not unconventional, Counselor. It is criminal. Miles raised a finger. We are not done. Your Honor. He signaled to the clerk. The video file opened on the screen. It was the footage Harborstone Title had preserved from the remote online notarization session. The room went dead silent. On the screen, the woman in the wig sat in the chair. In the previous low-resolution view on my phone, I had thought it was an actress. But now, projected on the high-definition screen of the courtroom, the truth was horrifyingly clear. It was Celeste. She was wearing a black bob wig. She was wearing sunglasses, but the hands, I knew those hands. I knew the specific way she held her pen, and when she turned her head slightly to look for approval, I saw the familiar line of her jaw. My mother had dressed up as me. She had put on a costume to steal my identity, and then the audio played. Say yes, you idiot. We are on a timer. Harrison's voice filled the courtroom. It was sharp, cruel, devoid of any affection. It is okay, sweetie. Just say yes. Celeste's voice followed. In the courtroom, the real Celeste let out a sob. She covered her mouth with her hand. Harrison stared straight ahead, his jaw working furiously, refusing to look at the screen where his own voice was condemning him. Miles paused the video. Your Honor, Miles said, that is the defendant. Celeste Simmons, impersonating the plaintiff, and that is the defendant, Harrison Simmons, directing the felony. They forged the quitclaim deed. They attempted to secure a hard money loan of $450,000 against a property they did not own, and when that failed, they physically breached the property and changed the locks. He showed the photo of the smart lock. This was not management. Miles concluded. This was liquidation. They were cashing out their daughter to pay their own debts. The judge didn't even look at the defense attorney. He picked up his pen. The court finds that the plaintiff has met the burden of proof for the preliminary injunction. The judge said, the quitclaim deed recorded on January 22nd is hereby declared void ab initio. It is a forgery and a nullity. The clerk is ordered to strike it from the chain of title immediately. He wrote furiously on the docket. The court further orders that the attempted deed of trust is permanently rejected. The temporary restraining order is converted to a permanent restraining order. The defendants, Harrison and Celeste Simmons, are prohibited from coming within 500 yards of the plaintiff or the property at 12 Pelican Way. They are prohibited from contacting the plaintiff, the homeowners association, or any financial institution regarding this property. The judge looked up, and regarding the lock, Mr. Simmons, you will turn over the access code to the bailiff immediately. If you fail to do so, you will be taken into custody for contempt of court right now. Harrison stood up. His hands were shaking. He wrote the code on a slip of paper and handed it to the bailiff. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, but Miles wasn't finished. One more thing. Your Honor, Miles said. He walked back to his table and picked up a single sheet of paper. It looked old. The edges were slightly yellowed. My grandfather's lawyer turned to the courtroom. Throughout this ordeal, the defendants have relied on the assumption that if they could just forge a signature, they could trick the system. Miles said, they believed that the deed was the only lock on the door. But Walter Simmons knew his son better than that. He held up the paper. This is a protective memorandum of title, Miles announced. It was drafted by Walter Simmons and recorded confidentially with the county clerk's special fraud unit 3 years ago. I stared at the paper. I had never seen it. Grandpa had never shown it to me. This memorandum, Miles explained, dictates that no transfer of title regarding 12 Pelican Way, whether by deed, trust, or lien, can be validly indexed after the death of Walter Simmons unless it is accompanied by a specific, 6-digit internal authentication code known only to the grantor and his designated successor. The courtroom went silent again. Harrison's head snapped up. "You mean," Harrison whispered. Miles said, looking directly at my father, "that even if you had succeeded in the forgery, even if the notary had stamped it, and even if the fraud alert hadn't caught it, the recording system would have automatically flagged it as invalid 24 hours later because you didn't have the code." Miles smiled. A thin, sharp expression. "Walter knew you would try this. Harrison, he didn't just give Isla the house. He installed a dead man's switch. You were never going to win. You were fighting a ghost who was 3 steps ahead of you." I felt a lump form in my throat. Grandpa, he hadn't just left me a condo. He had left me a fortress. He knew the nature of the people who raised me, and he had built a wall they couldn't climb, invisible and unbreakable. The judge shook his head. It seems Walter Simmons was a very prudent man. The gavel finally banged. Hearing adjourned. The fraud packet is to be transferred to the district attorney's office for criminal review. As the courtroom cleared, Deputy Rourke was waiting by the doors. He wasn't smiling. He was holding a file. "Ms. Simmons," he said as I walked out. "Deputy," I said. "We have the judge's order," he said, "and we have the video. The district attorney is issuing warrants for forgery, identity theft, and attempted grand larceny. We are picking them up in the parking lot." I looked past him, through the glass doors. I saw my parents walking toward their car. They were arguing. Harrison was gesturing wildly, blaming her. Celeste was crying. They weren't going home to Stonegate Heights. They were going to central booking, and from what Miles had told me, they wouldn't have a home to go back to anyway. The deadline for Vantage Point had passed. The Sharks were coming for their house. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Sloane. She had been sitting in the back row, silent as a ghost. She looked tired. Her eyes were red. "Isla," she said. I turned to her. I didn't know what to expect. Blame? Anger? Sloane took a breath. "I sent the statement," she said, "and I gave Rourke the text messages." "I know." I said, "You did the right thing." She looked through the glass at our parents, who were now being approached by 2 uniformed officers. She watched as Harrison was turned around and handcuffed. She watched as her hero, the man who could fix anything, was read his rights. "He called me this morning," Sloane said quietly. "He told me to delete the texts. He told me that if I loved the family, I would lie for him." "What did you say?" I asked. Sloane looked at me. "I told him that I loved the family too much to let him turn me into a criminal." She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was strong. "I am sorry." "Isla," she said. "Not because they got caught. I am sorry because I let them make me part of it. I am sorry I didn't look at the website. I am sorry I believed them when they said you were unstable." I squeezed her hand back. "You broke the cycle. Sloane, that is all that matters." We stood there, 2 sisters watching the police car lights flash against the gray city sky. The empire of Harrison and Celeste Simmons had fallen, dismantled by paper, pixels, and the foresight of an old man who loved the ocean. 3 hours later, I was sitting on the balcony of the condo. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. The ocean was loud, a rhythmic crashing that drowned out the noise of the last 3 days. The lock on the front door was gone. Mr. Henderson had installed a new deadbolt, and this time, I was the only one with the key. The lockbox was in the dumpster. The broker's sign was gone. I held a glass of wine in my hand, but I wasn't drinking it. I was just watching the light catch the liquid. On the table next to me was the cream-colored envelope, now empty, and the copy of the protective memorandum that Miles had given me. I picked up the memorandum. It was just a piece of paper. But it represented something I had never truly felt before. Protection. Actual, tangible protection. My parents had always told me they were protecting me. We are handling it. We are doing this for you. But their protection was a cage. Grandpa's protection was a key. He hadn't fought them with shouting matches. He hadn't fought them with drama. He had fought them with the truth, recorded in the county archives, waiting for the moment it was needed. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like grapes and sea air. I wasn't happy. Exactly. Happiness felt too light a word for the heavy, solid feeling in my chest. I felt grounded. I felt real. The system had worked. The timestamps held. The logs didn't lie. And for the first time in 35 years, when they called me crazy, the world looked at the evidence and called them liars. I looked out at the horizon, where the water met the sky. Thank you, Grandpa. I whispered into the wind. I checked the paper. And I won. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lily Revenge Stories. It has been a wild ride through the dark side of family and finance, and I hope it reminds you that the truth is always worth fighting for. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe relaxing at home like Isla on her balcony? Drop a comment below with your location and let me know what you would have done if you found that lockbox on your door. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold and precise, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of vindication. And don't forget to press the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Stay safe, check your paperwork, and I will see you in the next one.